Good morning. My name is Reverend Lawrence Richardson, pastor of Linden Hills United Church of Christ. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Linden Hills congregation and everyone else who loved and knew Miss Carole Brosz. Today we celebrate the life of this beloved child of God. Carole loved life, family, music, and roses. She was very active in church for over 40 years, held numerous leadership roles, and enjoyed singing in the choir. Carole spent her last years at Park Shore Senior Community, where she succumbed to complications from COVID-19 on January 9th. We gather here in the protective shelter of God's healing love, where here we are free to pour out our grief, release our anger, face our emptiness, and be ready to receive comfort and support for our common loss. We gather to commend to God with thanksgiving the life of Carole Brosz as we celebrate the good news of Christ's resurrection. For whether we live or whether we die, we belong to Christ the Lord, both the Lord of living and the dead. Now, please rise together in body and spirit as able for our opening hymn for all the saints. You may be seated.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. No human relation gives one possession in another. Every two souls are absolutely different. In friendship or in love, the two side by side raise hands together to find what one cannot reach alone.
This is Matthew 28:20. Teach them to obey everything I have commanded you, and I will be with you always, to the end of age. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, a time to dance. A time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. It's not too late. I added that at the end. I love you, Granny.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory
At this time, we will have members of Carole's family share some words of remembrance.
Thank you all for coming. I had a pretty good mom. Many of you probably feel that you did too. That's not as common as you'd think. Most people say they had a good mom, but did they really? I think my assessment is bolstered by the impressions communicated to me by several close acquaintances. Every one of them that expressed an opinion came to the same conclusion. And I think that it is also reinforced by the 4 people here that I'm proud to call my brothers and sisters. When Mom passed last January, my brothers and sisters brainstormed and jotted down some of her accomplishments. There were many, and you can read about them in her obituary. But I don't think most of those things had an impact on my life, the things she did and she accomplished. So I'd like to speak a bit more about how I knew Mom and what she gave me, or at least what I took away from her life. I always knew my mom and dad had my best interests at heart. Having 56 years under my belt now, it just seems to me that many of the world's problems stem from children not knowing this. So I feel pretty fortunate that I had this knowledge in my formative years. Mom had a right way and a wrong way of doing things, as we all know. In my youth, as far as household chores went, I was usually doing things the wrong way. Luckily, Mom was there to show me the right way. I maybe didn't always show it, but I think that I knew inside that she was just trying to make me better, to make my life easier, and I draw on many of those experiences in my daily life, even today. When one of my daughters wanted white carpet in her room, my first thought was of Mom. White carpet? That will show way too much dirt. Do you know how hard that would be to clean? That was Mom. She was right. But sometimes you have to let your loved ones live and learn. Wade, my son, my brother and I just visited a Men's Wearhouse the other day to get Wade a shirt for this very funeral. The salesman touted the benefits of a no-iron shirt. Just throw it in the dryer with a wet rag for 15 minutes. No, that would not pass muster with Mom, and that's not how we do things. So I ironed that shirt yesterday, and I thought of Mom. In retrospect, I can see that that was Mom's method of guiding me down a better path. I may not have always shown this back in the day, but I do think quite a few of those choices modeled a system for me that has made my life easier, or at least more tranquil, due to the steadiness that Mom showed. Mom wasn't always right. When I didn't clean my plate, she always said the food would feel bad. How would I feel if I were the green beans that weren't eaten? To this day, I always feel bad for the food I leave uneaten. In elementary school, I lived in constant fear that I would have an ingrown toenail or a pimple that would morph into a painful boil that would require emergency surgery from Dr. Miller and weeks of hospitalization. Thankfully, neither of these nightmare scenarios were ever realized, but I know Mom told me these possible consequences because she was just trying to steer me down the right path. But there were many practical lessons that I draw on even today. Don't throw gum out without wrapping it first. Might get stuck on someone's shoe. Don't use the oven on a hot day. Heats up the house. Hot water for whites and cold for everything else. Close the blinds on a hot day when the sun is shining in a window. That's what I mean, a lot of really good practical advice. In short, what Mom taught me is if you get your daily habit set, it just makes living a whole lot easier. But it's hard for children to take this advice if they don't feel like they are loved. So that's a large part of the secret sauce that Mom added. At least for me it was. I guess I took that for granted that Mom loved me, but as I look around the world today, I realize what an accomplishment that really is. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty happy person, and I think my mom knew that before she passed. At least I told her that, and I think she understood that. And I hope I showed that to her, and I think my dad knew that before he passed also. They both knew that I was a generally happy person, and I hope in some way that that gave them happiness because they were a large part of that. During the last few years, I'd call Mom and ask her what she was doing. Her response was always the same. Nothing, reading the paper and watching a little TV. I'd always ask her why her TV was so small. Was there a problem delivering new TVs to Minnesota? Because TVs had certainly improved and gotten much larger over the years. She would usually get the joke, and then she'd ask me if I'd heard from Monty or Roger or any of my other childhood friends that she remembered. I think she was going back to her routine, things of which we had spoken before, which made her day easier. When I first moved to Texas and after Dad had passed, Mom and I used to talk about many things, but the last few years the conversations became shorter, maybe only 2 or 3 minutes sometimes. But it seemed that Mom was still pretty happy. She had many accomplishments. She had many reasons to be happy. She was a joy to be around, even if she was a bit quieter than she had been in her heyday. So that is why I make my case that I had a pretty good mom. No, that's why I'm certain that I had a pretty good mom, because she cared. Because in her actions, she showed that she loved me. And because of that, I trusted and believed in the example she set.
I first met Candace's mom and dad in her driveway 2 days before Christmas and 3 days after our first date, while totally smitten with their daughter and hoping to make a good impression. After a short commiseration with HO about how terrible driving was in the cities, it rapidly became clear that her mom was the socializer. After a warm greeting, she engaged me with questions and easily created conversation. I came to realize that, although she did grow to like me, it was not that she was so impressed, but that it was her openness to each person she met. Carole epitomized a non-judgmental approach not only to people, but also to situations. Over the years, whether it was Marta, Mike, or Carole at a family event, she always made a point to connect with them, as she did with Zoe, Jeff, and Rich. Mom did not use the X or step prefix for relationships. We were all her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchild. When Mom moved from South Dakota, she forged new relationships, not only through us and her new church home, but also with other residents in her condo community. As Mom needed more care and was less able to function on her own, she moved first to independent senior living and then to assisted living. There, she again made new connections through her ability to generate conversations, an especially useful skill with congregate dining. When the first wave of the COVID pandemic arrived, complete with lockdowns and visitation restrictions, we installed a camera to help us communicate with her and to be able to check on her well-being. Whenever caregivers were in her room, Mom always engaged them in conversation, asking how they were doing or finding out about their family. Of course, due to her memory problems, there might be some repetition, but she sensed the need to connect, and the staff genuinely seemed to enjoy her, as she never complained about her changing circumstances. After the summer, as restrictions eased, we were able again to help her with daily tasks, and she loved to go outside for walks. She would still use her conversation skills to connect with us and the staff. Then, in early November, another wave of COVID hit her facility, and restrictions resumed. Shortly before Thanksgiving, Mom herself got really sick with severe intestinal symptoms on top of breathing difficulties, and she fell silent in her interactions with her caregivers. We had already discussed what to do in this situation, and we made the move to provide her with hospice care. This allowed us to help in her care, and after several weeks, the worst of her symptoms abated somewhat. Mom slowly began to interact with the staff again, as well as with the hospice specialists, and we were all encouraged that maybe she still had some prospects as she was eating some and regaining some movement. On her last day, after Mom had eaten a whole slice of pizza, she took up my offer for a foot rub while she was sitting in her special chair. I had to kneel and reach down to do the foot rub, so she could only see the top of my head. And shortly after I started rubbing her feet, she asked me, "Do you like working here?" One of her well-used conversation starters. To Mom, every person deserved to be acknowledged and engaged. That same night, the aide who had been there as they tried to care for Mom after she fell and before the emergency crew arrived, shared that Mom had been so nice, and even when asked if she was hurt and needing help, had said she was just fine, although it rapidly became clear she was not as she lost consciousness. That was Mom, thinking of herself, not never, but always of keeping those around her comfortable, right to the end of her life. We miss you, Mom. Thanks. And Candace has asked me to read hers since she doesn't think she can do this. Mom was born in 1929. She was a Depression baby. The no wasting anything stayed with her all her life. If there were leftovers, it got put into a container in the fridge. As those leftovers were still leftovers after the next meal, that food got put into a medium-sized container until all we had eaten but a small bite-sized amount that was left. Yes, that amount too was saved in a bite-sized container. We wore hand-me-downs passed on from various cousins and siblings. These clothes were kept in Mom's custom cherished cedar closet, where all the itchy wool clothes were kept away from moth invasions. Her generation reused plastic food bags over and over. They were rinsed, turned inside out, and hung on the clothesline to dry, beside the clothes that were put out to dry summer and winter. Frozen jeans and sheets were the norm in the winter. Mom rode her trusty bike around in trip. You could get anywhere without going more than 20 blocks. Most residents drove their cars 2 blocks just to get downtown. Mom cultivated a huge garden. Produce was canned or frozen. One day, we butchered 100 chickens and we didn't even live on a farm. Yes, Mom was good for and to the earth. The chaplain asked Mom if she had a garden, and she replied, "Oh, I grew a few flowers and a little lettuce." I never heard Carole Brosz be critical or say anything mean to anyone. The words that describe her are accepting and forgiving. We made a plaque together at church camp. The quote she wanted on it was, "To have a friend, you must be a friend." After living in South Dakota for 70 years, Mom moved to the big city after Dad, or H.O. as she called him, died. Here, she learned to navigate in her car from Kate's house to my house to the church. She found her new church home and spot in the new choir without missing a beat. I tried to sing beside her to follow her strong alto lead. Her love of music sustained her even in her last days when COVID kept her isolated. Alexa played her beautiful, beloved Sousa music, and she clapped and tapped right on the beat. Even though Mom's memory failed her, she remembered specific things about her grandchildren and children. She was always interested in their activities. She especially enjoyed reading to children. Mom read to us as children on Sunday when the comics or funnies came out in the newspaper. I swear that is the only time she sat down all week, and oftentimes she fell asleep before she had even finished the Peanuts comic strip. One day, When Mom was in assisted living, she surprised me with a question. Do you really like coming to see me every day? To care for someone who once cared for you is truly one of life's highest honors. Thanks for showing me the way, Mom. The favorite trait we shared was the love of ice cream. Our favorite, of course, was Mom's homemade vanilla ice cream. I left home at 18. Mom insisted that I take a sewing kit with me. Why would I need a sewing kit? Mom always did the sewing. Darning socks, repairs, putting buttons on, even repairing Gretchen's big Teddy at age 89 when Teddy needed emergency surgery. My sewing kit consisted of needle, thread, thimble, and scissors. Mom's kit was a cabinet that opened into 3 big drawers, accordion style, filled with buttons, thread, packs of needles and pins, and even something called bias tape, which she insisted she had to take with her to her small apartment when she moved. We made her kit like the one she made for me when I left home, plus, of course, the bias tape. A lot of life did a 360 when Mom needed more care. A few months after Mom died, I needed to repair a torn pocket on a top that had hung in my closet for 14 months. Now Leo does the sewing and he was not home. I dug out my 53-year-old kit Mom had sent with me. After many frustrating attempts at getting the skinny, wimpy thread through the tiny, tiny eye of the needle with my bad eyes, I thought, just wear another shirt or wait for Leo. But then I looked at the bottom of the sewing kit, and there it was, a needle with thread already through that tiny, tiny eye. Another gift from Mom.
Thanks to my brothers and sisters for sharing a lot of things that I had forgotten. I got a few of my own. Mom took her last breath on January 9th. 7 months have gone by, and about every day I think about something that Mom taught me. We gathered today to show appreciation to our mom, Carole, Ray, Joan, Hirsch, Brosz. Yep, she had five names. I learned this at a very young age when I couldn't understand why she needed 5. All the rest of us only had 3. We recognized her service to church. Faith was at the center of her core. Oftentimes inviting the pastor and his wife over to a huge Sunday dinner following church services, so his kids got to hang around for an hour or two for visits about all the solutions to the problems all around the world. Not much has changed sometimes. So many times when we made the trip to the Black Hills, Camp Placerville, where she took an active role in planning the week's activities for the whole camp. As a family, we were there, we could grow together, we could work together, develop memories, sit around the campfire for Vespers services, and yes, Mom learned to paint landscapes. Some of those summer memories were made at our Uncle Reuben's cabin during our vacations where everyone could relax and get to know our other uncles, aunts, who usually hung out, and we hung out with several of those. Many of those summers we did that. Everyone knew Mom liked to sing and pretty much spent her whole life singing in the choir. What many of you didn't know was all the basketball games that we as youngsters played in the house when Mom and Dad were gone. They'd come home on Wednesday after their Wednesday choir practice during the nights. Brian always dominated those games, but he had a few years on us. Candace could hold her own. Kate was the timekeeper and warned us to put the furniture back or we'd get in trouble. Tom, I'm sorry you missed out on all those. It was a lot of fun. Somehow Mom knew we made the house a mess because we had all the furniture scattered all over the place to make the hoops. And then she noticed when they got home, something was broken or there was a mark or two on the wall. we couldn't put it by her. Mom, thanks for the many leadership roles in our community involving the commercial club, band boosters, etc., all the organizations that she was active in. You pointed us all in the right direction and taught us what was important in life. I wouldn't have the work ethic I have today if you didn't give me my list of Saturday chores. Sweep the sidewalks, polish the shoes, clean the basement, pick up the beans from the garden, vacuum the car, among many, many others. You made me complete the list before I played. I think I'm the only one who had the Saturday chores, but I couldn't be for sure. We want to show our appreciation for raising our children, even Tom. Candace, Kate, and myself found out at a dinner table one night when Brian was already off to USD that we were going to have another family member coming soon. My memories of Mom's flushed face, Dad's smile, and Candace's reaction, "Mother, how did that happen?" They're forever in my memory bank. Being a great sister, a devoted and loving wife, and most of all, showing us for just being a good role model for how to live life without ever complaining. How about the Christmas Eves and trip, where Dad would have the Super 8 film rolling with a 300-watt bulb shining in everybody's eyes as we opened presents, and mostly surprised when we discovered what was in those presents. Candace and Kate, I know Mom knew you peeked before you were supposed to open them. Mom's trees were always beautiful, and she gave us teaching moments when she told us about where all the ornaments came from and what the meaning was of each of them. Remember the time when Mom lost $100 in the card that was stuffed in the box with jewelry that Dad gave her and the fireplace that was burning right beside? Somebody wasn't real happy with that one. Speaking of jewelry, Mom had plenty left over, and we all have great memories of wearing her seeing her with her matching sets of earrings, necklaces, and pins. She had a great granny role. She kept us fed, all the grandkids fed. We had a routine breakfast on our own. It had to be done before 9 o'clock, or we didn't get breakfast. Dinner and supper, always on time and always good. I remember cooking the liver and onions and the beets. Candace taught me how to spit them out in my napkin, but Mom found a way to sniff them out and wanted to know who did it. And she knew that I didn't like beets, so I usually got blamed for it. There was always the good stuff that we could never get enough of as well. The dumplings and nifla. We had to keep a count because we couldn't eat too many of them. Remember coming home from school, I always made myself a couple of peanut butter toast. I could only have 2. Yeah, right. She'd always count those 2. I remember the candy stash that we had right in the kitchen. It seems like Mom had a count on every piece of candy and knew when we lied about how many we really took. She helped me learn to read during her ironing routine, taught me my first poem. I still remember it. It was like hachoo, hachoo, acting involved. I don't know what to do. My nosy nose is running so, hachoo, hachoo. And it seemed like that took me about 3 years to learn that. She taught me how to fold socks, make the church with my hands. You remember that? You did one of these deals, and she'd say, "Here's the church." I'd say, "Where's their church?" She'd say, "Well, there's the steeple." I got that one. She said, "Well, you open the doors and you see all the people." I don't know. That was probably took me a couple of years to figure that one out too, but it just stuck with me. I remember some of the same things that my brothers and sisters talked about as well. A couple other things that I remember is the chicken thing. I don't remember if there was actually 100 chickens that we did that day, but I do remember them, Mom giving the old whack across the neck and taught me how to do it. And then we fried them up, and they were pretty dang good. We did that right in our backyard. And there was one time when I fell out of the treehouse. I remember waking up, because I was out for about 2 hours, I guess. They tell me. Mom was right there asking me if I was okay. Of course I was. I remember running into the street marker one time when I was throwing a mud ball up in the air and run and catch it, whoom, whack it. Big old cut. Had to drive to Parks in South Dakota to see the doctor. Mom took me. It was about a 12-minute drive, but it seemed like it took about 3 hours, to get there. Mom got to the point where her short-term memory was gone, but she could still tell a story about the time her Grandma Schmidt, 80 years ago, made her take a small glass of wine from her house across the street to her 4th grade teacher after recess one day. She still seemed happy, still never complained. Yep, that was our mom. We love her for being a great one and forever thankful for all the good memories and the lessons that she taught us about life.
All right. I wrote this little poem for Granny. For our matriarch. I am a woman born of a womb within your womb. I breathe in memories of your wind, of your wings, of butterflies flying away. You sowed the seeds of milkweed and taught us the lessons we'd need to carry on for generations until we all migrate on to meet you. I exhale peace, release, transform, time to flee the cocoon, migrate towards God, to love, to yourself. We are all vines of our matriarch, flowered and flowering, dying and dead. Red roses adorn a crown of thorns. I promise to acolyte ceremonies for you, Granny. Grandmother, mother, sister, friend, child, ancestor.
They need a little cleaning. Okay. So I got nominated to read for Lynn because I think I can hold it together here. So this is Mom's sister. She's our younger sister, and she wrote this. She's sorry she couldn't be here today, but as everybody knows, her youngest daughter is having surgery. This is what Lynn wrote. As the months have passed since my sister Carole has gone to her heavenly home, I reflect on my sister's earthly journey. Born at the beginning of the Great Depression in 1929 and passing during the pandemic of 2020, she seemed to always find the positive in all the roads God led her to travel. As the little sister, I was almost 12 years her junior and remember her to always have the style and attitude I hope to emulate. The Shirley Temple doll and all of the outfits were a hand-me-down to me, but all in perfect condition. Yes, I was the one that felt the need to cut Shirley's hair. Our mutual love of ice cream and our walk to the local drugstore soda fountain was always a treat. We would share a sundae, and I would be allowed to sit on the edge of the magazine comic book rack to page through the selections to find a favorite. We loved Sousa marches, movie scores, 78 RPM records, and parades. Twirling a baton, dancing around on the shag carpets, and riding with her on her bike are memories of our early years. After she married H.O. and they started their own family, I often was allowed to have a sleepover and be the big sister to her children. Her home was always immaculate, and cooking, gardening, and hanging clothes on the clothesline were fun times. It's kind of a pattern here. The chores assigned seemed to be accomplished by a hum, a song, or a whistling in the background. I know she was an involved member of her community, church, children's schools activities. Along with the Trip Study Club, she compiled the Touch of Trip books. It is one of my favorite reference sources as I try to remember names and faces of many of those wonderful trip people and places that influenced my life. In 1952, I moved with my mom and dad from Trip to Yankton. Most weekends, my parents would go back to Trip to spend time with my siblings and their families and my grandparents. I would bring my friend Patty from Yankton, and along with my nieces and nephews and our East Coast cousin Fred, we would create a summer backyard circus. Carole and my sisters, sister-in-law, and friends' moms would help us with costumes, baked goods to sell, and audience tolerance. One year, I remembered their work and our creativity raised $99 to send to the children's home in Sioux Falls. The children who were residents of the home were polio victims and had physical disabilities. My children enjoyed the times at Aunt Carole and Uncle H.O.'s house. It included many of the experiences we didn't do much of or have at our Yankton house. Gardening, picking rhubarb, family sports, cats, men playing musical instruments, German language spoken on much of the main street. Sit-down family lunches, the Brosz backyard jungle, cousins who were teens and young adults. Tom, being Jill's age, the exception, and speaking of Tom, his one-person comedy and stage presentations. Carole, H.O., Ron, and I enjoyed a great vacation on the Big Island of Hawaii, and also the nightclub and the nightlife and clubs of what is it? Oahu. Is that it? Well, anyway, you guys know what I mean. We rented a convertible, drove around the teenagers, and loved the ocean, volcanoes, pineapples, breakfast on the balcony, and a bit of shopping. Carole and I could talk Du Bois into just looking around the shops, but H.O. and Ron like looking at their checkbooks more than stuff. As years passed, I would always look forward to trips back to Minnesota and South Dakota to see family, eat strudel, kuchen, Fleischkekle, Nifla, and homemade ice cream. As a family, someone would always sit down at the piano and we would gather to sing. The Von Tripp, also known as Von Trapp family, we would emulate. Lots of laughs. Carole and Lila Hirsch, Brother Bob's widow, visited California in 2007. My husband Ron was no longer driving, and I was the original Uberlin for the drive to Sacramento, San Francisco, and Southern California. Ron was always critical of my driving skills, but amazingly, he didn't have much comment. When we arrived at Jim and Jenny's house, son-in-law Jim asked Ron, "How was the trip down here?" Ron replied, "It was like the rolling version of the TV program, The View. The three of them haven't shut up for 3 days, and they all talk at once. My apologies to Lila, and I know not to be that way. I think you were lumped into that comment because of Carole's and my ability to chat nonstop for 650 miles and 2 overnight stops along the way." They can talk that long. Since Carole has joined departed family members in heaven, I am sure the alto section is enhanced with her voice and enjoyment on her face of being with family. She was all about family and brought that love and caring to all of us that will join her in the heavenly choir someday. Love forever from your earthly family. The angelic choir has welcomed you, and we hear your voice and love every day as a piece of Carole lives in all of the lives she touched. Then we have something from her neighbor, Gladys Stallings. Gladys was her neighbor at her condo when she first moved up here. Mom gave Gladys lots of food, and Gladys was over at Mom's 2-3 times an hour fixing her computer. So we are forever grateful to Gladys, and I wanted to piggyback on something that Leo had said. Mom went to Gladys's daughter's funeral, and my sister took her there and brought her back. Gladys was black. Mom looked at Candace in the car, and she picked her up, and she said, "You know, I think I was the only white person there." Mom just never saw. She just never saw color. It was just Mom was accepting, Leo, as you had mentioned. So this is what Gladys wrote. "My dearest neighbor ever, from day one at Edinburgh, you greeted me as a friend. And for 6 beautiful years, you were so caring and sharing of your family and mine. I came to this page looking for you to share my newest blessings. I think you met the first 2, but you are not here. Anyway, I am writing to let your family know what a beautiful woman you are, and I hope to see you again in the great by and by." That was from Gladys. And then the last one is short. This is from her sister-in-law, Peg Jackson. Your mom is a truly great person with a lifetime of caring and blessings always in her wake. All of you and yours are the proof of that statement. She became my big sister when I was 8 years old, and there she has remained for all these years. Love to all of you as you honor her and release her into the next great adventure. She will love it, I'm sure.
Such beautiful words spoken at this time. If there are other family members or loved ones that would like to share briefly some thoughts of remembrance, you were invited to come forward at this time. If there are if there's no one coming forward, now we will hear a song, I'm Doing Just Fine.
Wow. That's amazing. Amazing people, family, brothers, sisters, all our brothers and sisters. Just blown away by this. Pastor Lawrence, thank you for being here. And we thank the folks from Lake Harriet United Methodist Church for letting us be here. And for all, not only for you coming today, all of you, which Tom already said, but for all the care that you gave and showed towards Mom throughout the years, especially in these last times in her life. This song that we're going to do is a thank you to Mom. I hope you see it that way, Mom. But you know, if it wouldn't have been for Mom, I wouldn't be playing this guitar. Some of you know this story, but when I was a senior in high school, I hurt my knee in the first game of the football season. And I thought my world had ended. I really thought that was it. Nothing to live for. Can't play football. And while I was laying around, moping around the house, Mom said to me, well, you know, Uncle John gave you that guitar. It's upstairs in the attic. Now, Uncle John was, you heard his wife, was Margaret Jackson. And they had 2 little kids at the time. And he was on his way to seminary, Episcopal Church. And they had a car accident. He was killed. And he was also a musician. And he left this guitar behind. And one day, Aunt Peg asked me if I wanted to play that. And I said, sure. But I'd forgotten about it. And then Mom reminded me that it was up in the attic. So she got it down, and my life changed. I became aware of songs like We Shall Overcome. and learned social justice. Whole new page opened up in my life. And so I'd like to thank Aunt Peg, Uncle John, and especially now, Mom, for introducing me to a new life. You know, my sister Candace brought this to my attention, that whenever Mom was asked how she was, she would say, "I'm doing just fine." And then, Kate, you echoed that sentiment. I heard a song there. It goes like this. They'd wed the 1st of March in 46. Dad died in 95. Mom lived another 26. She'd moved to the cities to be near her daughters and their kids. Made a new home in Edina, yes she did. And when asked how she was, she'd always say, "I'm doing just fine today." Her children grown with children on their own now. Grandchildren gotten big with kids of their own now. Somehow she knew they'd grow strong too and find a place to belong to while she would fade away. Yet in our hearts she'll stay, doing just fine today. Always doing just fine today. Always doing just fine. Always just fine. Hey, Mom, don't forget, we will always love you too. Those early married years must have been hard on a teenage mom like you, with Dad off to college and you finishing high school, while trying to teach us the right from the wrong, saying, "Children, don't fight, let's all get along," and cheering us on by humming your song, doing the kitchen dance, leading us on, saying, "If you do it at all, you got to give it your all." And at least for the time being, we'd like to think that we kids are doing just fine. Yeah. Yes. Thank God for grandmas and for grandpas too, for aunts and uncles and cousins. Mom, you're the family's glue. And the nieces and the nephews and the spouses and the spices, the in-laws and outlaws too. You got the garden out back and the roses out front. You go to church on Sunday, Sunday school too. You taught God's love rules, especially when you'd say to us, "Kids, you're doing just fine, okay?" Always doing just fine. Always doing just fine. Always doing just fine. Hey, Mom, don't you ever forget, we will always love you too. Mama, may we rise and walk with you. You have shown us how to make it through the pain and through the loss, to that thankful side, where we too can say we're doing just fine today. We will always love you too, doing just fine today. We'll always love you just fine today. Always love just fine. Speaking of kids, are you going to come up and sing? Are you going to sit where you are? Which is it going to be? I forget again. Somebody help me here. Decision, Candace, sit, come up. We'd like to see the kids. I know I'd like them, even if, you know, you want to come up, kids? Come up here. They'll help you with the song. Now you can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, 6. Here comes a big kid right here. Come on. What's this your dealio? What are we doing?
It is into your hands, O merciful God, that we commend your beloved daughter, Carole Brosz. We entrust Carole to your merciful care. We do this in the faith of Jesus Christ, who died and rose again. Holy One, we ask that you now receive her into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the company of the saints. Carole loved roses and had a rose garden, as you have heard. Following today's service, you are invited to take a rose from the vase in the sanctuary here. Following the service, you are also invited for a time of food and COVID-spaced fellowship. We invite you to pick up your food in the reception room across from the sanctuary, and then to enjoy this time together in the outdoor courtyard adjacent to the reception room. Additionally, memorials may be sent to Linden Hills UCC and or Joyce Uptown Food Shelf. Information for both of those are found in your bulletin. And now I offer you these words of benediction. May the God of peace bless you and keep you. May the God of grace shine light upon you. And may the God of all creation be alive in you, just like it was alive and is alive in Carole, today and always. Amen.